some people who were willing to do that for us. I would like to mention the cards that are on the chairs. Some of you are supporters of ours already, and some of you may not be, but I would encourage you to support us if you would like our programs and projects. And we don't even call it membership anymore because we do not have monthly meetings. You do not have to come to meetings. We sponsor events and projects and programs, and you just attend whatever piques your interest. So we'd love to have you as a supporter. My husband and I did not grow up in Washington. We moved here in the 70s, so of course it's our hometown now too. But I did find 4 people who did grow up in Washington, and they're willing to share their stories. And of course you can interject your memories anytime, and we can ask them questions afterward. Tonight we'll hear from Kenny Hop and Becky Theme Holmes, Lisa Uphoff, and Sid Pudic Asturias. So this is very this is very casual, and I do think they can probably hear you better if you stand. And if you do want to put notes anywhere, you can stand over here, unless you have a good voice that will project. You're welcome to sit if you think you're going to be loud enough. So whoever would like to start, Kenny, I will ask.
All right. Again, my name is Kenny Hop, born and raised here in Washington. Lived in a lot of different locations here in Washington. When Sue first contacted me about doing this, I thought, yeah, my memories I have is playing sports. I played a lot of sports, and very fortunate to play a lot of good teams in grade school and high school. But I thought, you know what? Another big part of growing up in Washington was the number of houses that I lived in growing up in Washington. So that kind of made something different, a little interesting. So, if you know, my dad worked in construction and built a lot of the houses that we lived in. Mom would decorate them, Dad would build it, Mom would decorate it. So they start off in the house in Robine. The first house, after getting married in 1960. My sister Robin was born, I believe, in that house. My dad said, you know what, I'm going to build a house myself and get a little nicer house. So built a house on Lincoln Street in probably 1962. And there my sister Angie was born. So from there, built a third house in the Felper's Edition on Locust Street. And that was in, let me see, 1965. And yeah, I was actually born in that house. Also, I was going through some old stuff from my mom and dad. And the Washington Reporter at the time did House of the Week. And their house at 407 Locust Street in Felper's Edition was featured in the Tazewell Reporter for House of the Week. So it was kind of a neat little article. They interviewed my dad, my mom, and talked a little bit about it. I'll pass this around if you see it. So lived in that house, I think until 1969. Again, great house. I do have memories of, even though I was very young when I lived there. Felper's Edition was a great subdivision to grow up in. Had a lot of kids, and remember playing sports and stuff with the neighbors there. Unfortunately, that's one of the houses my dad built that the tornado took out, but it's no longer there. Even though it was, again, House of the Week in 1968, I think April 11th, 1968. So after that, Mom and Dad decided to move to California. My dad had relatives live out there, owned a construction company, to come move to California, Southern California. We got more work. My dad was a bricklayer, a masonry. He said, all right, let's move out there. So moved to Ventura, California, rented a house there until we found a house to buy, then moved to Camarillo, California, not too far from Ventura, and parents bought a house. Well, this was 1969, 1970 in Southern California. Anybody think any big events that happened, that negative events that happened in that time frame? Manson murders, yes. Mom and Dad said, you know what, this is probably not a very good place to raise a family. We're moving back to Washington, Illinois. So that's what they did. 1971 time frame. Moved back to Washington, rented a house on Bobolink, and Dad bought a piece of property at the corner of Dallas and Kruger Road. So that we're going to build, let's see, this would have been house number 3 or 4 that he had built. And so yeah, we moved in there, it was done. Then from there, he bought a lot in Hollands Grove subdivision. So we sold our house at Dallas and Kruger, moved in a rental house on Weaver Street off of Kern, till the house in Hollands Grove Lane got built. Moved there, lived there for 3 or 4 years, and said, hey, let's buy this lot across the street in Hollands Grove and build another house. So, again, I think that was house 5, I think. Lived there most of my high school years. So I had a lot of good neighbors and a lot of kids living in that subdivision. The Desters, the Robersons, the Bowleys, Powers, Doors. So a lot of good kids our age. We had a good time growing up in that era. So after that, Dad always wanted to live out of Westlake, and there's never any lots for sale out there. And I would say 1983, a lot came up for sale. I think one of the Essigs owned it. I can't remember which one. And maybe it was Herman Essig. So Dad bought that lot in 1983 to build the next house, number 6, I think it was. And so in the meantime, we had to live in rental property till we got that house built. And that one was on, let me see, Trails End, which is back by the sewer plant, not too far off Kern there, Firethorn, where it is now, not too far from there. That was a nice rental house because people named Donzies lived in that house, and they had a nice pool and a pool house, so obviously us kids liked that aspect of it. But got to move out to Westlake. Let's see, it was my senior year in high school, and lived there for about 3 years. Parents didn't really want to move there, but they got a job or an offer on the house that they really couldn't pass up, and decided to sell it. So they moved to a house on 24 toward Eureka. It was a house that was for sale, and it's been on the market for a while, and the owner said, I'll rent it to you. So the parents rented that house. And then like 2 months later, they sold the house, so they had to move out of that house. Bought a house on Hampton in Devonshire. So I think that was my sophomore, junior year in college. I went to school in Indiana, and came home 3 times that year. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. They lived in 3 different houses. So it was like, before I came home, it was like, okay, where do you live at now? What's the address? So yeah, Hampton, they liked that house, they renovated it, did work there, nice house, but they missed Westlake, and they wanted to get back out of Westlake. So a house came up for sale at 206 Lakeshore Drive in Westlake. So they bought that house. It was pretty much, didn't need much renovation, it was pretty up to date, but they did do some upgrades to it. It was there for quite a while, and then they had a boat they kept down at Eastport Marina. So they decided they were getting ready to retire, said let's move to Eastport Marina, and a condo down there. So they were the first person to buy a condo at Eastport. I think it was 408, 406, Mayor's Way or whatever. Like that, as close to their boat down there at the marina, but then they didn't like all the steps because it was a 3-story facility, so it had a lot of steps. So they built a duplex down there. So it was only the master bedroom was on the main floor, and so that worked out well for them. Then I had moved back, my wife and I, back to Washington in 2007. We built a house, and my dad helped me build it and doing stuff. And he's like, "Man, it'd be nice to have a house again. Give me something to do, being retired." And about a week later, I was driving home from work, and I drive by Westlake. I see a sign that says "House for Sale, 310 Lakeshore Drive," which was what Dad built in 1983 for sale. So I called him up. I said, "Hey, your old house out at Westlake is for sale. You said you live in a house again. You might want to take a look at it." So sure enough, him and Mom came and looked at it, and it was kind of in a time warp. It didn't really change much from the time they sold it in the 80s to, when they decided to buy it. So they, again, kind of gutted it, updated it, worked on it like they did all the previous other houses. And that was always one of my mom's favorite houses that she lived in. So it kind of came full circle. My dad, a couple of years ago, approached me and said, "Hey, I'm ready to downsize. Are you interested in buying my house out of Westlake?" And I always loved living out there. And said, "Yeah." So I talked to my wife and my kids. Said, "Hey, you guys, sell our house on Kern. We're going to buy this house out of Westlake, Grandpa's house." So we did that. So it kind of came full circle. So still the house living out in Westlake. So good memories.
I have lived back here in Washington for about 5 years now. I think I was gone for quite a while, but anyway, I was raised here. In the beauty side, I'm the oldest of 10 children and 7 brothers and 2 sisters. My mother just turned 100 in August, and she's still living, and she just had her 100th great-grandchild. So it's been quite a ride. Graduated from Washington High School, and was married right out of high school to Bob Blumenshine. We went to Dartmouth. We had 2 daughters, Sherry and Angie, and was divorced about 10 years later. Wanted to get away, just wanted to make a new life for myself, so I took my 2 little girls and moved to San Diego, California, and met the Northridges out there. They were Washingtonian, Bob and Jane Northridge. I don't know if anyone here would remembers them, but they just took me under their wing, helped me find a place to live and everything. My brother Nick was with me, one of my brothers, and I went, we were there about a week, just moved into a duplex, and it was Saturday night, and we were out of clothes. I needed to go to the laundromat really bad, so I said, "Nick, take care of the girls." They were 8 and 10, and I went to the laundromat on a Saturday night about 8 o'clock, 8:30, and it was in Encinitas, California. There was nobody there, of course. It's Saturday night, I'm about halfway through my laundry, and the door opens, and in walks Tony Asturias, doing his laundry. He approached me. He helped me fit my dollar into the dollar machine, and that was about it. We talked a little bit, and we were both driving Corvettes at the same time, my Corvette. The muffler had gone out, so I asked him if he knew of any place to get a muffler fixed. He told me of a place, and then after that I left. I was done. I guess he told everybody in North County, "If you see her, leave her alone. I want to find her." And he didn't find me it was about a week or 2. And before I got my hairdressing license out there, I got a job at Del Mar at a little boutique on 101, Highway 101. And one day I was, rearranging clothes and at the turnstile, and walked Tony, and the lady that owned the place said, "May I help you, sir?" And he looked over at me, he said, "No, I found what I've been looking for." And he came over, asked me for a date, went for a date with him. He took me to see The Godfather movie. and after that we started, that was in April, we were married in December. And I just lost him 5 years ago. We were married 47 years. And so we were actually down at the Lake of the Ozarks when it happened. And my children, I have a daughter in Metamora. She said, "Sid, move back up here where you have family," which I have tons of family. And so I did. And so I'm back here in Washington and getting used to it. I mean, San Diego is the best weather in the entire world. And but it's overpopulated now. I really wouldn't care to be back there. But our time at the Lake of the Ozarks was wonderful. And so I'm getting into things, and then all of a sudden I see Sue Freeberg at the gym, and she said, "Sid, would you want to come over and talk to me and a couple other gals about, Washington and this and that?" And I said, "Sure." And I get here, and here's my audience. But anyway, there's lots of you I know, a lot of you I recognize your faces, but I don't remember names, and we've all aged and everything. But it's nice to see everybody. It's good to be back home. And I've got lots and lots of nieces and nephews. We had over 100 and some people at my mother's birthday party in August. And so it's nice that, and none of us I've not lost any brothers or sisters yet. And I'm the oldest, I'm 80, so it's wonderful. I'm very fortunate, very blessed. And gosh, thanks for listening, you guys. I live right across the street from an old neighbor of mine on Booth Road, Steve Chapman, right over there. Steve Chapman, and I couldn't believe it. I babysat him. Thank you guys. And Joan, I went to all through, hey, remember our 8th grade, my birthday at 506 Catherine? Thanks, guys.
Looks like I'm up. My name is Becky Holmes. I was thinking. I'm going to have to probably read some of this because I am not very prepared. My parents grew up in Washington and both went to Washington High School. My grandparents were from Washington. My grandma and grandpa Thene lived on a farm on South Elm Street. We still own that farm. No one lives in the farmhouse and others farm it. But it's still in the family. Much of my childhood was spent there, playing up in the haylofts, building forts, things that kids probably wouldn't be allowed to do today. We played in chicken coops. We didn't care. We ran through them barefoot. It just didn't matter. We pretty much had to run the place. Grandma, the only time she would get upset with us if she saw us on the roof of the chicken house. But it had a nice slope to it, and you could slide down, so we were up there a lot. In my early teens, my dad paid my sister and I and a friend to walk the bean fields and pull weeds. And he quickly found out we really weren't doing, we were out there just getting a tan and having fun. So he didn't tell him. I'm not even sure he paid us. We were just, we spent a lot of time at the old round barn on South Street as well. And I had some pictures of it, and I left them at home. The pictures, though, they're just little snapshots, and the barn was really in disrepair at that time. It was, the whole one side of the roof was caved in. But we used to play there all the time. We loved the ponies. We would go there and feed them apples. They weren't very well taken care of. We'd sit there and try to pick the cockleburs out of them and their manes and tails. It was just a fun, kind of peaceful place to go. Then let's see, I went to St. Patrick's grade school. We used to try to sneak over to Phillips. The Phillips 66 gas station had the best candy counter. And if you try to sneak out at lunch or during ball games, Sister Mary Ann usually caught you, and that didn't go over real well. one of my memories from that time of my life too was I went to a city council meeting. A couple of friends of mine from St. Pat's, we went there, we wanted a roller skating rink in town, because at the time, we used to have to go up the square, get on a bus, and go to Morton to roller skate. And lo and behold, we got the skating rink down there that's now the Countryside Banquet Facility. So I was kind of instrumental in getting that started. One thing I always like to argue with people about is that our neighborhood that I grew up in, it's over on Eldridge Street, Eldridge and Lynn, kind of that area. It was the best. I argue with people that, my friends that live in Felker's Edition, they say theirs was the best, and ours was. We played every night together, you know, games of kick the can, red light, green light. We discovered if you kicked the guide wire to the street light, it would go out. And a lot of the kids had to go home when the lights went out, so we kept kicking. Somebody was in charge of kicking the light to keep it on longer. Most of the parents had different ways of calling their kids in at night. Usually a bell, a whistle. Some would just flip their porch light on, yell their names. The Beanie kids, we just went home and there was nobody left to play with. Oh, and I don't know if people remember, there was an ice skating rink behind the police department. They used to flood the tennis courts. Back then, we would walk there, you know, skate for hours and walk home. There was no cell phone to call your mom to come get you. You walked. That's just what you did. Let's see what else here. Oh, in 1981, my husband and I moved to Virginia. There wasn't a lot of work around here, and he was out of work, so my brother and sister lived out there, so we went out, and I didn't even make it 6 months. I thought, I had a girl was 1, I was pregnant. I said, I can't raise my children out here. I wouldn't feel comfortable with them running around in these neighborhoods that I don't know. I just can't do it. So we moved back home. I'm a townie. That's what that's what I was then, that's what I am now, and actually very proud of it. And I think that's about it.
Well, I am going to say my neighborhood was the best. But actually, what I would say is, this is the kind of neighborhood I grew up in. That on Sunday afternoon, we went to my grandma's house. She lived at, both my sets of grandparents lived in Rutland, over on the old 51. And we came home and this big sign was in our front yard that said, you know, for sale, moving closer to Wrigley Field, Chicago. And it even made the Reporter or Courier at the time. I remember there used to be an article, and so you say, well, what in the world, where did she grow up at? Why was her family or dad mean or something? They would do that. So I grew up in Felkers. I probably should have backed this up a little. But Kimpling's, right, is here, and the motel is here. And my mother still lives in the same house that I grew up in, right here. She's there right now. She's lived there since 1960. She started out in a little house right here. So most of you know Bob Lindsley, right, from the store. Well, Bob grew up here, and then my mom and dad lived here originally. So what's really interesting is Bob has all these stories about my dad that we have never heard before. And evidently they all flow from when my dad had a garden in this backyard, and Bob would go over and visit with him. And my dad convinced him one time that he was eating worms, so Bob had to try them. And anyway, all kinds of stories, but my mom still lives there today. So I grew up there were 4 of us kids. My 2 older brothers, Kevin and Dirk. Kevin lives in Escondido, California. He's retired from the Navy. And my brother Dirk lives in Phoenix area. He lives in, gosh, he's moved a few times. He lived in Surprise, he lived in Peoria. I think he's in Avondale now, but they're all right outside Phoenix. And then this is me, and my little sister Penny lives now in Valdosta, Georgia. She still works for Caterpillar. She works in IT, so she's been very lucky that over the last few years they moved to Oklahoma City for a while, and then they moved to Georgia, and she still works for Caterpillar and does the same job. So she's very fortunate and very happy. And these doors are still there, by the way, in the house. They're still there. Had a lot of remakes, but that's not it. So this is my 5th birthday. I just ran across this today. But what I will say, what's interesting to me is bike riding was a very big activity back then. So this would have been 1970. I know it was my 5th birthday because I got my purple bike and I already knew how to ride it because I had learned it at the next door neighbor's bicycles. They had all kinds of bikes. So I got my bike and I hopped right on it. And I grew up in Felkers in this kind of neighborhood where the parents sat outside every night after dinner. Right? This was before central air. And so you might have had 1 air conditioner in a room or 2 if you were really lucky. And so this is, we had a playroom in this part of the garage, and then this was the working garage. And so this is just after supper, and that's my mom sitting out with my neighbor Shara Bicey, and that's when Steph was a baby. So, but every night you would see the parents out at one of the houses. Right next door, this direction, were the Alexanders, Chuck and Carol, and their 4 kids. And then across the street from them was Marvin, Kate, and Heverin, and their boys, Brett, Tim. And then behind us were the Biceys, and then across the street were the Labatts. And so we just had a really wonderful group of neighbors. So wonderful that I say that, I mean, they were just the best. And Becky is not fibbing. We sat around, we had a happy hour for the neighbors one time, and we had a big discussion on who had the best neighborhood. There were a few more people there, though, that grew up in Felkers, so I think that's how we went out that day. But one of the things that was always on people's minds growing up in that neighborhood was the Cubs versus the Cardinals. I mean, I know it's still quite a rivalry, but my dad was one of the only Cub fans. So he took a lot of grief from people, but he gave it right back. So I don't know how many of you know my dad. I know a few of you here did. So this would have been, I don't know, today, of course, it wouldn't be possible or even sane, but back in the late 60s, Felkers was not in the city limits of Washington. It was considered still the country. And the neighbor across the street told my dad, you know, you stinking Cub fans, I'm going to take a cardinal pennant and I'm going to put it on top of my roof. And my dad said, don't do it. I'm telling you, don't do it. He said, I'm doing it. He goes, I'm gonna shoot it down. And he got up there, he put it up there. My dad got out his shotgun and he blew holes in it. And so you just never knew what was gonna happen. So hence that sign that I opened with, the house for sale. And then you could fast forward a whole lot of years with a lot of new neighbors. And when I was in college, my mom and dad went on a trip out west to see my brothers, and I was staying at the house, and one day I went out to get the mail. Someone had taken his mailbox, painted it cardinal red, put cardinal sticker on the flag. So it, you know, it just continued his whole life. Always there. We used to have wonderful block parties. I remember Mr. Reams down the street, he taught guitar lessons, and he taught my dad how to play guitar. And what I remember about the block parties, it would be interesting if my mother was here because she would have a lot of different stories about the block parties, but I remember the bands playing, us kids all riding around on our bikes, and I remember getting the ice cream, you know, that came in the small little things with the kind of like bamboo stick or whatever. We thought those were the coolest things ever. And I remember eating those, and then one year my dad was singing after Mr. Reeves actually taught him a song. And he was just in heaven, and we were all like, oh, Dad! So we had the house on the block where all the kids play, because we had a flat front yard, and then we had 2 trees, so one was home and one was second base. It's kind of built right in. And so you name it, we played it in our front yard, kickball, wiffle ball. Basketball started at our house, then moved across the street to the Heverins, and then when the Heverins moved, the pole came back to our house. I remember Chuck Alexander getting out his tractor and pulling us all around the neighborhood in the snow. Just great times. Baseball was down in the pasture. Charlie Kuntz owned this huge pasture behind your old house, right?
Yep.
And baseball would be played there, but I think probably, well, we had a creek behind the house, so my parents had a house, then the Bice's, and then there's a great big vacant lot. And then there was a creek that ran behind it, and then now you come out and the bank's there. Heartland, right? Or no, Washington, it used to be Washington Savings, and now it's Community Bank. That's right there. And so we used to play around in the creek a lot, right, with crawdads and things like that. And Jay Alexander, Becky's son-in-law, we used to attempt at least once a summer to build a tree house down there, and we never did succeed. But we had a good time trying. But I would say the thing that probably distinguished us the most in our neighborhood was we had our own track meets. And not only did we have our own track meets, it came with awards. And the guys made them, like Brett Heverin and my brother and Rudy, they would, you know, back then they would burn onto big pieces of wood. They had like, you know, first place pole vault, first place high jump. And we did. We had pole vault, we had high jump, and we'd have relay races around the small block, we called it. And it was just really a tremendous place to grow up and learn. And, you know, the ironic part too, Mike Labatt didn't even really participate in a lot of the pole vaulting and track meets. And he ended up having the record for the Peoria area for over 25 years in the pole vault. So it's pretty amazing.
Jay still has it at the high school.
Does he?
Pole vault record at the high school.
Very cool. So this is just a family picture. My dad, Howard, worked at Caterpillar in Morton. And I don't think I would be who I am today if I didn't go to Central Grade School. I'm sure that all the schools in Washington were perfectly great and lovely, but I have a special place in my heart for Central, and I always will. At our 10-year reunion, we got all the Central people together so we could get a picture. You know, people that you didn't even see a lot in high school. By the 10-year time, it's like we all missed each other and we really wanted to see and talk. And I see one here tonight that I don't think I've seen you since high school. And as Kenny referred to sports, that's why I like school. I like to play ball. And so this came up in a conversation not too long ago between Kenny and me. And so when I was in 6th grade, we took 6 of us to the state track meet, Pontiac, and we won the meet. So it was Central's first place state trophy.
Central was a pretty small school back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that's a good point, yeah. So when we went there, they had probably between 500 and 600 students.
Because I remember it being really small.
Mm-hmm. I read something that said in 1970 they had 620 students, and they thought that would be the max for quite a while. So I think it was right around 600 when I went there. Now it's over 1,300.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing, a whole different type of place. Here's just another one. I went in the county championship. I was telling Becky I went down, kind of down a rabbit hole of memories today. And I had a box in the back of my closet for years that I haven't looked at, and I pulled it out today, and I see Mr. Coach Reed over there. So I had, some softball ones and this and that, and I really got lost at work. Finally, I had to try to regain my focus. But I would say one thing I think you learn from sports, though, is you learn discipline and you learn willpower and tenacity, and those are all skills that will serve you well the rest of your life. And I'm very grateful for my experiences. And as Kenny said, I'm very fortunate to play on some good teams. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention church. That would just make my mom really happy. No, but church is why I'm here today too, because I did go to church in the springtime with my mom, and I stayed for coffee. And lo and behold, but my English teacher from sophomore year sits down and says, "Hey, what do you think about talking to people about growing up in Washington?" And then, of course, Washington High School. My life revolved around sports there. I am glad I do have a softball picture, but only one. But when I was looking back at the pictures, though, it was really, I saw a lot of volleyball pictures. And we've come a long way in Washington, and I'm so glad for it because, so I played volleyball in the 80s. We played in what they call the girls' gym, right? The old gym with the stage. And even the pictures that I looked at today, the walls were right there. I mean, the sideline is on this line and the wall is right here. And we're always very fortunate that someone didn't, really get hurt. So I'm happy when I see the news clips now or go to a game that the girls get to play in the big gym. And then besides sports too, then I ended up going to ICC, and while I went to ICC, I worked at Bob's Hardware, so I'm sure there are a lot of you that have memories of Bob's Hardware, True Value. And I just want to come back to, when I think about my neighborhood growing up, and then at Central, I think what I get from all of it when I look back is the importance of building good relationships with people, right? And that if you build a strong bond with people, it really does last forever, even when you don't see them. And as an example, I'll show you this. When my mom and dad, we had their 50th anniversary party up at the VFW in 1999. This is a picture of Felker's kids that came and went to my mom and dad's party. So there's 3 Vices, and there's John Alexander, and Jamie Labatt, and Rudy Heverin, and Jan Alexander. So, several of them didn't even live around here anymore. And so it's so meaningful to my folks, that they would come back and they would go to their party. I went to Western. I became a teacher. I taught for 11 years at Farmington High School. I coached volleyball and scholastic bowl. I became the union president while I worked there, and so then I went to work for the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and that's what I do now. Getting close to retirement, not there yet. But I will say, moved to Westlake in 2010, moved back to Washington in 2010, had lived in Peoria for 10 or 12 years prior. And while I really enjoyed Peoria, I liked it that I could be anywhere in town in 10 minutes. I will say Westlake is the closest feeling I've ever had to a feeling like where I was growing up that I've ever had in all the places that I've lived. We have block parties again. We don't call them that, right? But we have functions, we have poker runs. We collect money for charity. We do all kinds of fun things, you know, out there, and people seem like more than your neighbors. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Washington. People don't feel like just people you see at Kroger, right? Or at the gas station. And so I think I was really blessed to grow up here. I wasn't really looking to come back, but I did, and I'm really glad that I did. So thank you all for.
I have a couple things that I forgot to tell you.
Okay.
When I saw my mother today, and we were talking, she was talking about Halloween, and she said, be sure that I didn't know I was going to tell all of you, but to tell whoever was here, that when they went out trick-or-treating, there was no treating. It was all tricks. They didn't play tricks on her, they never got candy or anything like that, but that's how it was then. When she was a little girl in Ohio Pony Farm here, that every summer, her dad, my grandfather was John Norris, and he was the postmaster for 65 years here in Washington. And John, Mom and Pop would call him. Anyway, he would let the kids Hiles would give them a pony for the summer if they took care of it and fed it and everything. And Mother said that her sister used to get on the pony and ride all the way out to where that big old silos are that out there on the way to Morton. Yeah, they'd ride out there and have their lunch and then come back. But anyway, she said, be sure and let you know that there was no treating back in hell.
I think Mr. Greenberg has a question. I don't know if he has it for you or.
Said you have some other stories about you and your siblings growing up. About you and your siblings growing up in your neighborhood with the Chapmans and the Weenuses.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, there were 10 of us and not that many of them. We're out on Booth Road there, right on the corner. My dad bought that property from Rufus Rich and built that big the house because we were getting more and more kids in the family. And so down the road, Rufus Rich lived there, and then the next house was a family called the Chapmans. And they had a nice family, boys and one girl. And I was told there was one girl and only one bathroom. And anyway, we made friends and this and that. And then down, let's see, across the street was the Weenuses over here, Marvin and Eldon and Mervyn and all of them. And they were ornery, and my oldest brother's Jack. And Rufus Rich had a farm across from us, and he had sheep and this and that. And my brother Jack was hired to help with that and feed them. And one day he was up there, and then the Weenus guys were just real mean to him. They would beat him up. He came home and he was all beaten up. I got so PO'd. I took a broom and I ran up there, and their Eldon Weenus was this tall and I just beat him with the broom and across the back and stuff, and they never bothered Jack again. And the Chapmans were real good neighbors. I babysat them, and then lovely, beautiful, beautiful. I always thought your mother was so gorgeous, and your father was so handsome. You turned out pretty good too. Yeah, lots of memories about growing up in Washington. I remember my brothers used to go around the square and, shoot water or beer or something at people sitting around the square and do all these kind of things. They were honorier than crap. And ride the rails. My sister Lisa, we could rode the rails.
We did.
Did you? Yeah, rode the rails. Rode the rails.
Did you?
I did that. I was too. I didn't do any of that. I'm the oldest, so I was at home helping change diapers and do wash and babysit and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, my mother. I told her I was coming here tonight, and she said to tell all of you, and the good old days are gone, she said. And she wanted me to make sure to tell you that this Halloween, don't do treat, just do tricks. That's all. Yeah, she's character. She's still got all
start off in grade school, with the Central grade school, and played for Joe Snyder, great coach, great guy. And our 7th grade year, we got second in state basketball. And then our 8th grade year, we won state basketball, which I think we're the first Central grade school team to win a state championship. So when I got into high school, I played basketball, but football was my favorite sport. And my senior year, we were the first Panther team to make the playoffs, or win a game in the playoffs, to win 11 games in a season, and to make it in a state championship game. So had a lot of success with the team back in the day.
And anything you remember about certain coaches or anything?
I do, I don't know if I can say him or not. No, we had freshman coach was Coach Moss, Coach Cram. My sophomore football coach was Plesner and
Witherell?
it might have been Utenauer.
Oh, yeah.
Then yeah, junior and senior year it was Coach Ventura, head coach, and Coach Witherall, Coach Cooper, Coach O'Neill was their first year coaching at the high school, both of them. And see, who else am I missing?
Wisher,
Wisher, yeah, yep. So yeah, they all, learned a lot, did good life lessons from them, and was fortunate to have good teams, and was able to get a scholarship to play football in college.
I think one of the finest coaches ever at Washington High School was Noah Hickman.
Yes,
And then basketball, Dick Van Syre.
Yeah.
I remember that, yes.
Hey Kenny, I know you said football was your favorite sport, but you play basketball,
Yep.
and there's some story about Quincy High and Jerry Leggett and Kenny Hop.
I'm familiar with that.
You might want to expound it a little.
So, yeah, we played Quincy at Quincy, and Quincy had a really good program. Their coach was named Jerry Leggett, and they won I don't know how many games. We played down there, and we were behind a little bit, and we were fouling to stop the clock, maybe it's a free throw, and we get the ball back. So their player got the ball. I grabbed the ball at the same time, tried to rip it away from him, and I kind of gave him a little flip down to the court, trying to get the ball from him, and but the referee didn't see it that way. And anyway, Coach Leggett just come flying off the bench, yelling and screaming that I was playing rough and should be kicked out of the game. And then there was an article in the Quincy paper the next day and quoted him and said, yeah, that player, flipped our player, and tried to hurt him or something like that. So the next year, we played him at Washington. So our whole fans all were geared up for Jerry Leggett and the Quincy Blue Devils to come play, and had a bunch of signs and stuff. So yeah, it was interesting.
Did you beat him that year?
We did beat him.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Your father was quite an athlete, I'll tell you.
Yeah, played for Noah Hickman.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, he was good.
He thought very highly of Coach Hickman. So.
They all
Kenny?
did. Yep.
Kenny, you
Yeah.
talked about all the homes that your father built, but you left one out. The home to the Panthers called the Pantherplex.
Pantherplex, yes.
Yeah.
That was his final build, I guess. Yeah. He was very instrumental. We got this committee together this idea to build the Pantherplex. We were all, working, the committee had full-time jobs. We need somebody that's retired and knows construction. Who can we recruit to oversee this project? They're well, my dad's retired and he knows construction. So we talked to him about it. I think after a couple of Bud Lights, he gave in. All right, I'll do it.
Well, he devoted an awful lot of time to that project. And it
Yeah,
turned out.
6 months, yeah, and had a lot of good volunteers, people in here I know volunteered, and, yeah, it was quite the accomplishment.
It was pretty much all done with volunteer work, wasn't it?
Yep.
I think so.
Yeah, it was, yeah,
I remember that.
yeah. And Rudy did the concrete work, and, Troy Reed, with LS, donated a bunch of building supplies and stuff, so, yeah, it was,
Well, that's another reason, I mean, you wouldn't get that in a big town.
Not at
Small
all.
town. you know,
right. Yeah, we
You're
have,
gonna get that commitment from people.
we're
and-
still involved with the folk band and stuff like that, and when we have, a 7-on-7 tournament in the summertime, schools from all over the country come there, and they can't believe the facilities that we have with the Pantherplex and stuff,
Yeah.
and these are big, you know,
I like that you
schools.
could buy the, bricks and have them engraved,
Yep.
and I thought that was really a good way to raise money
Yep,
as
yep,
well.
it was, yep.
Any other questions?
Steve?
I know there's, on the Pantherplex, there's a lot of familiar names on those bricks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I know there's like 4 in my family with names on them.
very cool,
Yeah.
yep.
Kenny, I want to go back to Leggett for just a minute.
Did I leave something out?
Well, I think after Quincy came to Washington and Washington beat Quincy, then I think Leggett had a quote in the paper that we will never play Washington again.
You're right, yeah. I remember
That's a
that.
lie, because we've played him since then. He wasn't the coach.
Yeah, he got in a little trouble, if I remember correctly. Involving the cheerleader, I think.
We won't go there.
So Becky, I've got a story your dad told me that I've never forgot.
Okay.
After your grandma Themy died, and they were cleaning out her house, and she was brought up during the Depression and all. And they came across, I don't know if he's told you this story or not, but they came across a whole paper sack, and it was labeled "pieces of string too short to use." And your grandma Themy had a whole sack.
That really does not surprise me.
Kind of shows you what the people that brought up during the Depression had nothing. You know,
Gotta hang on to it.
they're too short to use, but we're gonna hang on to it.
That's great. I don't think
Yeah,
I
I
ever heard that,
remember
but
that
that does not surprise me. My grandma baby was the best.
Well, I have a good one for, about my grandparents. My grandparents, they used to put on shows, and they had a lot of friends that they put on different minstrel shows and stuff. And my grandpa had found this one play that he wanted to do, but it included a little black boy. Well, at that time, Washington had no blacks at all, ever, anywhere. And so my grandpa was just determined to do this. He went to Peoria, horse and buggy, went to Peoria, south side of Peoria, where all the black people lived, went down the streets and found a family and found a little black boy that he thought would be great. And the family said, "It's okay." And on the day of the play, my grandpa went and brought him and his parents over to Washington, and they did the play, and the parents got to be there to see their son in this play. My grandfather did that. They put on a lot of shows and stuff, minstrels, and you know where the Brecklands is now, that used to be the jail, and my mother said that they used to peek in the window, because you have to peek in a window down there to see the jail, and then right next to it was a restaurant, and it was the stories she has to tell us.
Well, my dad told a story of, they were in high school, and they put a cow in that, in the police department, like at late at night.
Did they
It
really?
was a prank. If you did something like that today, did you know that story? Yeah.
It was the city hall.
It was the city hall.
Yeah, there you
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But I mean, can you imagine if kids did that
That's
today?
a long time ago.
A long time ago.
We had sock there. There used to be Starbucks drugstore.
Well, the sock house, you had to
Yeah.
be 14 to go to sock house.
Yeah.
And the boy I liked was 14, and so he would go to them, and I couldn't go.
You couldn't go.
Like, what kind of boyfriend was that? And then they quit having them by the time I turned 14. So I never got to go to one.
My mother also said, she worked at Steinley's drugstore, and if anyone remembers Steinley's, it's where
My
Foster's
sister
Jewelry is, and that was. And she said they used to sell the ice cream. She worked there. She said they sold so much ice cream, and they had all the big band concerts there on every Wednesday. They had a big band concert, and she said she worked all of that. She had jobs all over town when she was growing up, and yeah, she said that they had the best sodas in town.
Rexall Drugs, too, you can get lime phosphates at Rexall Drugs.
Yes, yes.
Down Pharmacy had them, and so did Rexall. They were both
Mother worked at Rexall Drugs.
my aunt. Okay, yeah.
Lisa, any of your coaches that you want to have any memories of when you were playing basketball and
Any
volleyball?
coaches? Well, yeah, I mean, when I was at Central, we had Adrian Berry and Barb Moore, for years, and we had a lot of success. And then at the high school, we had Jan Smith, and then basketball, we had a lot of different turnover. Started with Coach Venturi, actually, was my freshman year.
I remember that.
And then, let's see, who did we have sophomore year? And then we had Lisa Williams a couple of years, and then Beth Landis, and then Coach Martin came in my senior year.
Was that Landis relative to Jim Landis?
I don't know. She was from Morton originally. I know that.
Jim Landis was in my era.
And then softball, we had Coach Smith, and then Coach Reed came in, I think when I was a junior.
Got me.
He doesn't forget much about softball.
My first memory, and I'll tell you, because I thought of it today, I was going through these articles, and I saw an article about a loss that we had at Limestone. And I thought that Miss Smith was being very diplomatic and talking about it wasn't our usual play. Because between the shortstop and the third baseman, they made like 4 errors. Because I played center field, and Carol, we were chasing the ball all game. Well, what she didn't know, or you didn't know, is because Lori and Terry had decided that day they were going to try chewing tobacco and see what all the fuss was, and why men and boys like it, and they played terrible. So they made all these errors. Yeah, we never shared that. We didn't tell on it. I also, back with my neighborhood, my dad was character, and a lot of people know that he was character. Like, he would go hunting and bring home 3 gunny sacks full of snapping turtles and let them go in the front yard, so all the kids would, run around. But my mom is more quiet. But once you know my mom, she's just shy, but she's got her own little personality. And one time, Chuck Alexander was teasing her. And so she got fed up and she said, all right, I'll race you. So she and Chuck raced from mailbox to mailbox down the street. I still remember it like it was yesterday. So.
That's so great. Really.
Anybody else want to dig any deeper? Or uncovered enough? Well, I really appreciate you 4 coming. And if any of you have suggestions of other people that I should invite to do this again next year, let me know. It is fun, it's casual, it's not a formal speech. So if you know of any names, it would be good. So please have cookies. There's a couple bottles of water over here. You can visit with people a little bit more if you want to. And hopefully we'll see you at another program. The Christmas house tour is one of our next